And the Project 1947 project to research multiple newspaper articles, and it's a heck of a collection online. In doing so, his interest was piqued by UFOs and water, and since then he's come up with some pretty fascinating connections. And please help me welcome to the stage Carl FEINDT.
Thank you, John. Before I start my presentation, I'd just like to thank MUFON for accepting my paper, and actually winning second place was quite an honor. So thank you, MUFON. All right. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my website. Whoops, it's not there. Terribly sorry. Space bar. There we go. Website, Water UFO. It can go long, it will go long. Backspace, there we go. Woo! Help! Back, nope, that's forward. Okay, there we are. It got cut off, all right. In any event, my website is dedicated to the collection of water-related UFOs. Now, that covers a wide breadth of things. In the following presentations that I'm going to give, there'll be many dates by month, day, and year. And should you be interested, you go to the website and just click on that date, and it will give you the full text. However, we don't have to do that thing. So now we'll go to number 2. There we go. Some adopted theme. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Here I am. I don't want you. Goodbye. Thank you. Things against me. All right. This is a slide from another researcher who I know well, Larry Hatch. And the only reason I bring this up is to give you a general idea of sightings in the North Atlantic area alone. Each one of these white dots on the screen is a case. And you can see, even in the ocean where nobody lives, we have dots. This is aircraft sightings in the air over the ocean and by ships at sea. One of the things, if I can get it here, there we go. If you just take a look at Florida, you can see the entire coastline of Florida. It's all white dots. Now, this is because in most cases, UFOs are either going towards the water or coming from the water. So it's quite common in ufology to find that. My interest in water-related sightings came long ago while reading books that have interested all of us. However, these books usually had only one water-related case in each book. The mystery to me was how something so profound as a UFO going in and out of water could be neglected, or overlooked, or so insignificant. Why was there no book or even chapter exploring UFO's ability to operate in and out of water? Well, as time went by, books were published with short chapters on the subject, such as Lorenzen's book, shown here, entitled UFOs Over the Americas, which contained one chapter of 10 pages. Well, it was a start. Then we go to the big book. This is finally in 1970, Ivan T. Sanderson published Invisible Residents, which described water UFO cases from front to back. However, the idea how they accomplished their penetration or exit from water was once again overlooked in favor of the concept of another civilization residing underwater on our planet. I don't buy that. Scientists use repetitive results as proof of their conclusions of their experiments. Ted Phillips, who we just saw, an investigation into case traces, does a similar service for UFOs. Water, unfortunately, dissipates any physical evidence due to motion of the liquid or dilution of the residual traces. However, could there be solid evidence in the form of repetitive verbal testimony? On starting the collection process of UFO cases, I had no concept of what I was going to find. I only wanted to gather all the cases I could to see if they did fit any kind of a physical pattern. Paul Hill's book, Unconventional Flying Object, just about cinched the idea how this craft could do what it does in water. In Chapter 13, Silent Supersonic Operation, he explains the field moves the molecules of the atmosphere it encounters to the rear, thus avoiding the sonic boom. A molecule of water could be moved in the same way. In physics, our atmosphere and water are both governed by one physical principle, and that's of fluid dynamics. Okay? An analogy to a light bulb can be drawn here if we think of the filament in the light bulb as the UFO, as the functioning craft. Represent field. Okay, we can see that this bulb protects the fragile filament from atmospheric intrusion and other damage. In the majority of UFO cases, it's undoubtedly the function of the field to protect the UFO. The speeds that are recorded in some of these cases could cause tremendous heating on the surface of the vehicle due to atmospheric friction, not to mention the possible collision with another aerial craft or life forms. The function of the field may not be limited to protection. The field might also be a part of the propulsion source, although nothing has been observed or proven along that line. Okay. These are the four groups that I came across in my research. As I continued my collection of reports, the major problem was not the lack of incidents, I have 960 cases, but the lack of text on what the water was doing during those incidents. For the most part, the cases report UFOs going into or coming out of water and then go into detail about the craft's travel or the craft itself. This is understandable as the craft is the unusual thing, not the water which we drink, bathe in, cook with, and sail upon. I eventually became frustrated that there was no clear correlation between what was occurring with the water in the different reports and began to think that perhaps all these disjointed groups of cases were leading me nowhere. One night, I sat at my drafting board and decided to draw each case group as a filament surrounded by a light bulb. The resulting drafting work came as quite a shock to me. It should be noted that this hypothesis is based on what could be considered a very small percentage of those 960 cases contained in the site. It does not take into consideration any testimony concerning UFOs entering water. I purposely avoided this because of all the things that could possibly be identified as UFOs, but that could also be space junk, aircraft, meteors, or your neighbor's football. Okay, so we get started on the drawing. In order to get an idea of what was happening, I had to attach a UFO to each of these pictures, so I made one to my liking. The next step was to add a field, which is commonly observed in ufology in the form of an ionized ball of light at night. I'd like to explain here, I didn't invent this field. This has been a part of ufology for a long time. And finally, I needed some indication of how this field might work, operating. I borrowed this from a book called UFOs and Anti-Gravity by Leonard G. Cramp. The idea of the magnet was an interesting, as in ufology, the terminology electromagnetic rears its head constantly. The only fault with this particular, if I can get the arrow, in this picture is that it extends throughout the entire ship. You've got forces coming out through the center, the middle, the edges, and if this is a high-power force field, it's going to fry everybody in there. So I didn't like that too much, so I made my own. Now, this is a simplistic idea, it really is. What I'm doing here is I'm inserting a bar magnet in the center of this UFO, and we've all done Physics 101 with the field coming out. You put the iron filings on it, and you have the field rotation top to bottom and back in again. All right. Keep in mind that inserting a bar magnet into water will not produce any result other than a wet magnet. So this whole magnetic concept, as I said, is kind of simplistic. But then I can insert this particular drawing into the four fields, the four drawings that I had up on the board before, to see if they fit in any way, shape, or form. It was just kind of like trying to see if anything matches in any way, shape, or form. So, since there was no continuity in any of those drawings before, I just decided to start from the lowest one and go to the highest one. So the first one is underwater. UFO coming up, the water bulges. In this section, we should visualize ourselves in a boat, leisurely enjoying the ocean view, when suddenly we notice a strange sight. A section of the water within our view appears disturbed. At first, it's like the water is boiling with bubbles coming to the surface, but within seconds, the surface becomes more and more agitated and appears to be rising and flowing violently. Suddenly, all this ceases, and we're faced with the craft. And here we have the craft, and as you can see, if I get the arrow, here we go. It's pushing up and back. So so far, this idea of this field, the magnetic field, works. I know it's not a magnetic field, but in any event, it works in doing exactly what we portray. It's pushing the water up and away. And here we have cases on this. I have several of them, as a matter of fact. Water swelled, the surface of the sea was bulging like an enormous ball. The surface was rising in one spot and looked like a round hill. I also have Venezuela's wrinkled or stirred up, producing the normal rise of water in Spain, an elevated turmoil, and the water had formed into a plateau. This last one, late 1954, elevated turmoil formed into a plateau, drove me nuts. I'm looking at round hills, balls, and everything else. It's all indicated a round surface at the top. However, it took a little bit of doing, but finally I realized that this is 360 degrees. This is flat. So what's happening here is we already have a wrong picture up here. Two things changed the idea of this field. One was the size of the object, and the other was the drawing itself. The magnetic field as represented here is not circular, but donut or apple-shaped. This fact slapped me in the face only after rereading the text and finally placing the sketch next to it. The flatness as represented in the sketch would be a plateau. Dictionary definition is an extensive stretch of elevated and comparatively level land. Now, the horizontal size, if a small UFO, shrinks the flattened area up top, which would give it a kind of a bulge, a ball appearance or a bulge. However, in this case, the last case, which I want to read a section of, is 65 feet across. So that spreads that area out, and he would be looking at a plateau of water. Okay. We'll go on. Okay, now note this bulge of water can be reproduced in your home, in your sink. You fill the sink full of water and you take one of those rubber syringes that you use to clean your ear and the wax in the ears. Simply fill the syringe with water, place it below the water level, and squeeze the bulb up. What happens is the water bulges. It does not come up, through, and up. It just bulges. And that's exactly what's occurring in this particular cases. The UFO is pushing up and out, and it's making a bulge. Now, in this case, it's called Encounter in the Gulf Stream. This woman in Massachusetts has a boat made in the Caribbean for some strange reason, and has a sailor bring the boat up to her in Massachusetts. So he leaves the Caribbean, passes Florida, and at this particular point where I'm going to pick up, he's opposite Georgia. But she, the ship, was not making any progress while over her forward deck was a considerable depth of solid water and a great thrashing up ahead. Looking in the direction of the thrashing, I perceived a great glow like a big school of herring coming near the surface and disturbing the luminous bacteria. This is usually called plankton. Only it was not the right color. It was more deeply orange in color and was like the annelids, which are common off Bermuda in certain seasons. But this was one continuous glow and not a collection of nickel-sized blobs of light. The glow seemed to come from the plateau of water, which was causing solid water to flow over my decks, hence impeding my forward progress. These are little snippets. This is actually a very long case. Then I saw it, a ghost ship bearing down on me. It must have been a windjammer under 65 feet because she had only port and starboard lights. And when I realized she was not bearing down upon me, but going away because her lights were on the same relative location as mine. Now, one thing you want to note is this guy is not screaming UFO all over the place. He's saying a ship, a ship, a ship. He knows nothing else but a ship. Okay, then we go on. On seeing this windjammer apparently bearing down on me, I had gone into reverse gear again, backing off once more into calm water. Perhaps 100 yards distance, even as I realized this windjammer was something else, the splashing and sloshing of water stopped, and the vessel, or whatever it was, rose out of the water. And the glow surrounding it subsided, so her running lights were much more highly visible. She had lifted off the water and was heading towards the now dimly visible continent of North America in a long upward slant and going what seemed to be a tremendous speed. Not your normal windjammer. Okay. This is a fixed-up picture. It's the only time you're going to see it because I don't want to go through all of them chopping off the tops and bottoms on this thing. But basically, that's what the field would really look like. And we have above the water, the UFOs just above the water, and there's a depression. In these cases, UFOs seen just above the water, it's invisible field acting as a plow, moving water in the direction of the witness. I just want to stop there a second. When I talk about a plow, you get a ship, you're always considering this pointed bow, and it's going through the water very sharply. You get a small wake coming off of it. This is a round field around the UFO, so it's basically flat almost, and it's pushing water ahead of it and creating waves and so forth. In several cases where the UFO did not move in the direction of the witness, but simply continued upward, we find the term depression or hole used to describe what was observed below the UFO. And here we have a few more of these things. France, we see water being whipped up all around it, making waves. Poland, hole in the waves. Pacific Ocean, and pushing water before it opened up a hole in the ocean. And the famous last case, Africa. Sea not flat, but dug in the form of a depression. Note again, you can do this in your kitchen sink. When you're doing the dishes, you get the soapy water in there that representing the white cap waves. You take a dessert dish and you push it down on the water, not just keeping the top of the dish out of the water. And what you can see is the clear water underneath. What you've got is represented by the dish is the field pushing the water down. Okay, now, depression and a mini tidal wave. This event occurred in a thin sliver of a country called Togo, Africa, on the African Gold Coast. A man and a woman had enjoyed a late night swim, and as they were about to leave, they heard an annoying whistle. Ted mentioned whistle before, and you're going to hear whistle again. I have no idea what that significance is, but It is a physical trait, evidently, of some sort. And next, after seeing a large dark mass, they were hit by a large wave. Okay. Then I quote from the text. It says, they were then afraid of being dragged away in water and not being able to regain the shore. A.W. succeeded in grabbing the trunk of a coconut palm. He held on with his right arm, holding on to the woman with the other. At their feet was now a continuous barrage of strong waves. This thing's coming towards them constantly, so it's wave, wave, wave. Okay, then he goes into a discussion about the various lights they were observing on the UFO, because it's a black object. And we go to the most interesting paragraph. The most interesting detail of this recount concerned the surface of the sea under the object. It was not flat, but dug in the form of a depression. A.W. estimated its depth at a few meters, 5 or 6. 5 or 6, that's 15 to 18 feet. That's quite a hole. It's a two-story building almost. Perhaps its diameter was comparable to the length of the object, on the order of 25 to 30 meters. That's 75 to 90 feet. This is not a small UFO. And the field would evidently be quite large. Okay. Of interest here is a comparable case I stumbled across on a ground depression. This is not water, this is ground. And I'm just going to give a short paragraph on this. The night of Sullivan's experience had been a moonlit one, but 3 nights later, on the 7th, the sky was overcast when young 19-year-old Gary Taylor was found dead in his car at the same spot. His automobile had been run off the road. Police who checked the area after the accident found a circular depression 2 to 5 inches deep and about 5 feet in diameter in the freshly plowed field. You've got soil that's been loosened up, and just as you do in gardens, you step on it, your footprint's in it. And well, this is evidently a UFO hovering in that particular spot and depressing the soil. Before we leave this slide, I'd just like to point something out. I was recently trying to find a video or DVD that Ted Phillips had done on the cave project. I know I saw it, but I can't find it. So I was viewing a tape that from a Kentucky MUFON thing in April of '99 to find it, which it wasn't on. But during the watching of this tape, up comes a UFO, a single one. If I can get this arrow going. There, we're down there. In any event. Yeah, there we go. Okay. In this single UFO that was captured, flat top, flat bottom, curved sides, this entire area, you didn't see the UFO. It was all kind of like silvery almost, but with multiple other colors going through it on occasion. So I'm saying, oh my goodness, yes. I was right all this time. How could I possibly be wrong? All right. Now, next group. The next group this is probably the single most important witness sighting in terms of understanding the total effects of a UFO upon water. We have here a fixed view of an effect, but also the beginning of what might occur if the craft moves further up vertically. This group is but one case. Now, I really didn't want to include it, but because of the later part, I decided that I would. It's a scenario of the right man, right place, right time, and he happened to capture this, and it was a group of other people with him. They occurred the 4th April of, late in April, unknown date in April, sorry, 1958, Brazil. Beneath the source of the seawater was turned up. Okay, here we have, in this one, we have the original one from that book I told you that I had copied the field from, and you can see the water mounding, and it's following the force field, the line of force. Okay. Now, the text, this occurred between Maceo and Parapuia, probably butchered that. Brazil, April 1958. On the northeast Atlantic coast, a businessman and several fishermen, were witnesses of a saucer-shaped object which came down from the sky and hovered above the water at about 40 meters, 120 feet, in other words, distance from them. That's not very far away. Beneath the saucer, the seawater was turned up and bubbled as if cooking or drawn up by invisible power. The object was as big as the tent of a touring circus and was about 15 meters, 45 feet, above the water. Okay, in this slide, my slide over here, I've labeled these two sections A and B. Now, the field itself is interesting, but A and B are also interesting. We have B already covered with drawing up water from the surface, but we also have another thing here about the exact same thing with fog. Fog is water. Okay, during the summer of 1951 or 1952, John Van Roden was employed by the Freedoms Foundation near Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. At about 8:30 on a very cloudy, overcast morning, Van Roden, accompanied by another employee, an older man, left the barn, over which hung a low fog layer barely 50 feet above the roof. He looked up and saw practically above the two men a large disc-shaped object. After about 30 seconds, the disc rose steadily without tilting, like an elevator. The fog layer boiled turbulently. It did not spin all one way like a vortex or a tornado cloud. It was sucked up in a funnel shape as the disk rose into the cloud and disappeared. The word sucked up will be a prime ingredient in our next group. But what we've been talking about is only this section here, B. A comes later in another case. All right. This is a big one. Comes out quite frequently. Above the surface, a water spout. The funny thing about this section was that it was almost left out. I had read the taking on water stories, which case alien knocks on your door and says, "Can I please borrow a cup of water?" And needless to say, I didn't have a great deal of faith in this stuff. I had no use for it in any event. I said, "This is just water in the craft." So I dismissed these cases. As I could see, no value. However, my friend, Tony Rulon, who wrote Blue Book UFO Reports at Sea by Ships, which is on my website, started beating me over the head with, "It's a part of ufology." So anyway, black and blue, I gave in. And as I started collecting these taking on water cases, I began to notice that this category has two parts to it. One is the obvious taking on water by cups, buckets, tubes, and hoses. But the second part was taking on water with no visible means of collection other than the ship. It was here that I realized that this part was not the collection of water, but some other influence of the craft itself. If you can take it on by hoses and pipes, why bother collecting it, not doing it this way, or vice versa? This type of case involves a UFO hovering over the water at some altitude. The witness describes a column of fog, mist, haze, or water reaching from the surface to the object. The terminology generally used in the description is sucking up water. This column, I believe, is caused by the rotation of the field, which is high speed. As this field rotates, it causes a friction on the abutting atmosphere, causing an updraft at the bottom. This, in addition to the oft-observed horizontal rotation on one part of the UFO, causes a swirling vortex to be formed below the UFO. This can be similar to a person rotating a finger in a pot of still water, causing a maelstrom to occur. Dictionary definition of a waterspout: a moving, whirling column of spray and mist with masses of water in the lower parts, accumulated because of a tornado at sea or other large bodies of water. Okay, we'll go through the countries here, dates and whatever, and read them off. Then rose from the bay surface, sucking with it a heavy upsurge of water. It was as if the water were being drawn up to it, a huge geyser of water. Next, oh, this one isn't on the slide. Next, a jet of water arose like a water spout. That was Brazil. A whirlpool of water rushing inward with a loud sucking and gurgling noise. Okay. United States, it was like a funnel. Again, I go back to that slide we had before with A and B. Those are funnel shapes. And it was being sucked up in a funnel, like a funnel. Okay. It brought the water up with it due to the fact it was whirling so fast. A gigantic pillar of water rose as the sphere emerged, collapsed later. A greenish volume of light, water, or vapor extended the underside of the object down to the surface of the water. 3 vortexes came out of the sea, and from inside them an object appeared. Okay, this is the last slide of this part. Could see the water of the lake surging upward as if being sucked into the machine. Column of water hovered 100 feet high by 15 feet wide before falling fan-like into the sea, sucking up a column of water almost as wide as the UFO. A center plume of water shot up from the bottom of to the bottom of the UFO. It was a water spout. I have 2 more that are not on the slide. I'll just read them off quickly. It appeared to be sucking up a column of water from the river. Okay. It was like a water jet from a hose, a great column of water. Now, that's a total of 15 cases with this sucking up and column of water going up to the thing. Just want to do countries: Canada, Malta, United States, Brazil, Poland, United States, Red Sea, United States, Italy, United States, Italy, Brazil, United States, United Kingdom, Puerto Rico. I don't get Chinese translations, so I haven't got any cases on that side of the world. But it seems to be a very common thing, sucking up water, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with accumulating water in the craft. I once heard a radio program where the guy was describing it, and he says, I think it was going into another dimension because it was constantly sucking up water and the craft wasn't that big. Where did the water go? It had to go to another dimension. Well, the water's not going into the craft. It's becoming molecular the closer you get to the craft, and it's just bouncing off the bottom of the thing. It's not going in. Okay. Now, this very last case that we had here, whoops. Didn't I do that? No, I didn't. Okay, sorry about that. Very last case here, April 26, 1994, is very interesting for a couple of reasons, but I'll just read a little bit of text on it. UFO takes a drink. Below the UFO, the water began to churn. Mist swirled in the air. A center plume of water shot up to the bottom of the UFO. It was a water spout. The UFO moved slowly to the left. I aimed the camera and took photo 49. 10 to 15 seconds passed while I stared at this amazing scene. Suddenly, the water spout collapsed. The UFO angled off to the left and climbed at a sharp angle, and disappeared into the sky. That text is from a book called UFOs Are Real, and here's the proof by Ed Walters and Bruce Maccabee. Bruce Maccabee did quite an evaluation, which he allowed me to put on my website. So if you copy down those numbers down at the bottom there, you can get the entire text of this thing and the photo. However, before we do the photo, we will do a sketch of what you're going to see. As you can see here, we have the trees in the background, and I can't, oh, there it is up top, okay. Trees in this dark background. You got houses along the shoreline. the water, and of course our UFO. The top is white because the sun is coming down almost straight down here. It's dark underneath, in shadow. On the surface of the water is a shadow of the UFO, showing there's a solid object up there somewhere. And the spout. There's your water spout. Over here is white foam, and that's it. And there's your photograph. Okay. The suction on the surface of the water is exactly the same as if a tornado was to pass from land over a body of water. The bottom part would be viewed as a mounding of water, and as we look up vertically up the column, the water becomes more molecular and appears as fog, mist, or a continuation of the water itself. The vertical movement of this water or water vapor gives the impression of water being sucked into the UFO. As the UFO gains altitude, the column of water is seen to collapse or, in the case of a night sighting, disappeared. Separation of this column is almost predictable, as the height of the UFO above the water and the size of the UFO governing the width of the field itself probably determines how much water weight the vortex can sustain. It would be interesting to compose a table with these figures. However, due to fright and awe on the part of witnesses, most of the time these details are lost. Okay, one of the things I also want to bring out is Newtonian physics. A body at rest tends to stay at rest. You've got this water, let me go back. Nope, that's forward, sorry about that. Back. Okay. You've got this UFO dancing at a certain altitude, and it's bringing this column of water up. In all the cases we've talked about so far, the UFO is seen to angle off and go in a distance. Well, this body of water is just dangling there, and then suddenly it loses the field because the UFO is shooting away. So it collapses fan-like. Now that's going to occur in several other cases as well. Alrighty. I have one more that is kind of a fun thing. This is July 17th, 1992, Atlantic Ocean near Aguapa, Brazil, a traveling waterspout. They pulled their sail down to slow the boat to avoid collision, but when the ship approached their boat, they realized it wasn't a ship. It was a UFO with a lot of lights on it. It was sucking up water into it, and it passed slowly within 20 meters of the boat, 60 feet. But the fishermen don't think the UFO saw them. It just went by them about 6 meters or 18 feet above the water, sucking up a column of water almost as wide as the UFO. The water didn't fall back into the ocean. The UFO went past them and disappeared in the distance. Here you've got one traveling at a fixed altitude, and the waterspout is traveling with it. Okay. Whoops. That's right. I went back. Okay. This is the drawing I finished on a night in February 2005. I had just put up another physical influence of water case, and I was frustrated. I'm saying there's nothing that I can put these things together with. So I started this drawing on the drafting board at 8 o'clock. As I stated earlier, I decided to draw the groups together on one sheet of paper and to see if anything would stand out. At 10 p.m., I had finished this drawing and was shocked by it. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I was tired. It was 10 o'clock. I was tired. My eyes hurt and everything else. But I just kept saying to myself, they're real, they're real, they're real. In ufology, you always keep saying to yourself, somebody once sent me an email and said, on a list. And I said, does anybody out there feel that we're really being a part of sci-fi, some great sci-fi thing? And you sort of sit back and say, yeah. I mean, you read these stories and they're stories, you know. You don't get the reality of it until it hits you in the eye. And this is it. What you have here is all four of the things which I've just chopped in and put into the first slides. A here is coming out of the water, vertically out of the water. B, if you want to call it that, is coming at you across the water. C and D here are rising a certain height above the water. So you have three different combinations here, but in all four cases, it's the same rotation of the field. The field complements what's going on with the water. To me, it was just like a gunshot to the head. I said, good gravy, these things are real. Okay. Well, the fun part of doing this presentation was I discovered two cases, one from Italy and this particular one from Poland. This is an excellent one. If you want to write down the date on this one, you want to look it up on the website. It's lengthy, it has very good sketches of the UFO, and it's a heck of a water case. Okay. You always wonder, you get this one thing with the bulge, you get this the sucking up water and stuff, but this is a case where it had all the ingredients in it. All the ingredients. Okay, first part. A sudden noise of rushing waters made me turn towards the sea again. And right in front of me, about 1,000 feet from the shore, the surface was again rising in one spot. It looked like a round hill pushed up from beneath, which it was. Number two. Then splashes of water gushed from the top like fountain jets and fell around the hole in the waves. If you look at the drawings, it really doesn't give the picture right. You've got this field. Here's the UFO. You got the field on either side. You don't see the field, but it's holding the water back. So you have a hole between the water and the UFO. All right? That's the hole in the water. Now, the best part of the second section here is this flinging water up like a fountain jets. Well, when you go back to that slide that I had A and B on, we're talking A now, it's at the top. You take an apple, a round apple, and it's exactly like this field. And at the top of the apple where the stem is, the apple curves inward, and if you put that under water, you're going to have water in that crevice, that funnel shape that goes in there. Okay, now so long as the UFO is underwater, it doesn't matter, the water's in the funnel. But once it breaks water, then you don't have any more water on top of it. You have atmospheric pressure pushing it down against the rotating field. So now it's being sprinkled out. And that's exactly what he describes here, like fountain jets around the hole in the waves. Part 3, and hovered above the same spot, but there was now a whirlpool of water rushing inward with loud sucking and gurgling noises. The field at this point, he's a little higher above the water. Field is coming down and turning in. As it turns in, it's dragging the water with it and sucking it up. All three in one case. Well, actually two. I have one from Italy. Well, two, but it doesn't have as much as this one did. Okay. However, the question of validity lurks in the background. Does this scenario work on land as well? Let us fly inland with the UFO to see if this vortex still works. First, we have to realize that there are no reports of the ground bulging, because UFOs haven't been seen to come out of the ground that I know of. And the only one I have that I presented earlier are being depressed by a UFO. The only other depressions are made by the weight of the UFO through its landing gear. This leaves only the mounding or vortex to be observed on land. But before we do that, our first case is not land, but very close. It's 6 feet of water, and is a very famous case which can be read in total on my website under waterness. Okay. I will only present the appropriate text here for review. The Tully Lagoon Waterness, Queensland, Australia. This is told as told by Bill Chalker in International UFO Reporter. A farmer's plowing his field, and over here he has a tree line. He can't see beyond the tree line because it's thick, and beyond that is the Tully Lagoon. Okay. But then he heard above the noise of the tractor a loud hissing sound like air escaping from a tire. But it was a large gray saucer-shaped object, convex on top and bottom, and measuring some 25 feet across. I'd like you to keep that in mind, 25 feet for the UFO, and 9 feet high. While I watched, it rose to another 30 feet, spinning very fast, and then it made a shallow dive and took off with tremendous speed. Okay, now the farmer walks, after the UFO is gone, and he walks to the tree line. He's curious. At the spot beneath where the object had risen was a huge, round, cleared area in the swamp grass. The water in the circular area was slowly rotating and appeared to be completely cleared of reeds. Later in the day, apparently around noon, George returned along the track and stopped for another inspection. The cleared area of the lagoon surface was no longer visible, and what was clearly evident was a floating mass of reeds approximately 30 feet in diameter that had apparently come to the surface of the lagoon during the time Pedley was absent. The floating mass of reeds and grass was noticeably distributed in a radial pattern in a clear clockwise manner. You note that the UFO was 25 feet, that's an estimate, of course, and the reed circle at 30 feet. You got 5 feet, so you're talking possibly the width of the field. All right. Also, the only other, this is the only case where a real UFO is seen leaving a real created crop circle. There's no question about this one. It was well investigated and had good witnesses. Okay. Out of the water. Snake River Canyon at Twin Falls, Idaho. On each side was a tubular-shaped, fiery glow of some sort of exhaust. He said that it went over the trees. They didn't sway back and forth, but rather the treetops twisted around, which suggests that the air under the object was being swirled in a vortex. Bingo. Okay. Another famous case, Stephen Michalak incident, Falcon Lake, Manitoba, Canada. Now, I don't have any text on the case, but I'm sure everybody knows this one. This is the one that got a UFO lands, this geologist-type guy walks over around the UFO, and unbeknownst to him, the occupants come back, shut the door, turn on the engine, and he goes whap, right in the chest. His shirt is burning. He tears off his shirt, and he winds up in a hospital with radiation poisoning and what he calls buttons across his chest, which match the grid work on the UFO's exhaust port there. In any event, this text was done after the incident. It's investigated by the Canadian Department of National Defense Training Command Headquarters, West Wind, Manitoba, dated September 1, 1967. Got this case from Don Ledger. Thank you very much, Don. The text is, this is the text. The attached photographs were taken at the site. Number one was taken from approximately 12 feet up a tree facing southwesterly direction, showing the outline of an approximately 15-foot diameter circle on the rock surface where moss and earth covering has been cleared to the rock surface by a force such as made by air at a very high velocity. Bango. Okay. And Ted Phillips Dalphos. Okay, this is dated October 10th, 1957. These land cases you won't find on my website. It's in the paper on my website, but not the case. A witness heard a whistling sound I don't know if that's the same one he was talking about before, but here we have the whistling sound again. And saw a circular object descend to within 6 feet of the ground. It hovered 2 minutes, sucking up leaves, grass, and dirt. Sucking up. Here we go. Now, this one's kind of neat. This is Furnace Creek, California, from the International UFO Reporter, winter of 2002 and 3. Timmermania, a step too far into the Timmerman files. There's a shorter version. After 4 or 5 minutes of waiting, the ball backed away across the road, and it began creating a vortex at the base of the mountain. The rocks started rising into the air. They would shake from side to side. There were hundreds of them, the largest about the size of melons. They started going around in a circle like it had complete control over them. Then the thing went away in the air, and it looked kind of like a tornado. It was all red. The only noise you could hear was the clickety-clack when the rocks hit together. Then the light blinked out, and everything crashed down the mountainside. Again, we got the Newtonian physics of a body at rest or a body in motion, and once that UFO shoots away, there's no support, and down it comes. All right. The light blinked back on again at the top of the mountain, meandered away. Now, I have another case of a guy dangling under a UFO and unceremoniously being dumped, but I don't want to get into that one. I'm going to get into trouble with this next one. There's a very famous case called the Coin Incident in Mansfield, Ohio. What happened here is a bunch of guys, pilots, are going for a physical. They go to get their physical, and then they go back to the base on their helicopter. Well, while they're en route to the base, the pilot sees in the distance a red light. He calls the tower and says, "What do you got, traffic up here?" And he says, "Nope, there's nothing there, just that red light." So anyway, it's coming faster and faster. The pilot's getting nervous, gets to the point he finally takes the stick, pushes it forward to dive out of the path of whatever's coming at him. Next thing you know, they're looking up, and there's this UFO sitting right above them. Light from the UFO is filtering into the cockpit. So anyway, the pilot looks at his altimeter, thinking the UFO must have come down with him. He didn't go down. He went up. Now, if we have, okay, you have your helicopter. He's coming along. He's trying to get down, and next thing you know, he goes up the funnel. The helicopter has X amount of weight. It's counteracted by rotating props. The engine's still functioning. The propellers are still functioning. It's basically a zero weight at that altitude. The UFO comes over him. He's got a suction below him. He pulls the helicopter up. I'll probably hear about that from the boys. Okay. Of note here are 2 MUFON Journal articles written by trace ufologist Mr. Ted Phillips in the December 2005 and the January 2006 issues. In these articles, he gives 77 cases where he uses the term levitation, not in the sense of the mystical rope trick or the magician's assistant rising in the air, seemingly unaided, but in the true sense of balance between weight and lift. There might be in these articles a few that have the abductee's beam of light that as a cause, but the majority to me seem to be caused by the vortex, because most of the cases in there don't have a beam of light. There are a couple, I believe, but 77 cases of levitation, bingo, you got it. This, in essence, ends my paper, but not the roller coaster ride. Bing. Now that we know that this field really exists, we will return to the water from altitude straight down. Okay, this time we will go deep, and yet another photograph given to me by a Turkish researcher, of which I, of course, can't verify as being legit or not, but it has its points. For a novel experience, we will look at this field from inside the UFO. through the windows, across the void between the UFO and the field. How am I going to do that? By two separate abductee accounts. But first, this green photo to illustrate part of the first abductee's account. Note the green light. Okay, the first account, date unknown, is from a book entitled Connections, and it's co-authored by Beth Collings and Anna Jameson. This text that I'm going to read is by Anna Jameson, page 119. As a note, I'd like you to realize that I spoke to Ms. Jameson at a conference held by the Fund for UFO Research in Maryland last year regarding additional information on the water's behavior. She told me that what was in the book is all that she can remember, and that was done under hypnosis, by the way, as is the second case that I'm going to recount, and that she was not certain she was underwater. However, once you hear the text and compare it to the second account, you'll realize she was. Okay, that's it, yeah, okay. In the text, at one point I saw myself in a long tunnel, keyword, with a small green light at the end of it. Small green light at the end of it. Now, arrow, here we go. If this green light is in this position here, and this is water, it could be reflecting. So what she's looking at is the green light reflecting off the wall of this tunnel. It's not a tunnel. The tunnel had soft sides. That's important. I was thrilled or amazed that I was not walking down this tunnel, I was just moving down it, floating. I even wiggled my feet at that point. She, the hypnotherapist, never asked me to go to the end of the tunnel, so I don't know where or to what it led. Now, this floating scenario in ufology is fairly common, in abduction literature anyway. Now, I'm going to go to the second report. This one I know this guy went in the water, and when you hear the text, it's almost like a dupe of the first. It's just certain variations. January 3rd, 1979, Miami, Florida, USA. The witness is Filiberto Cardenas. The text, the name of the book is UFO Contact from Undersea by Dr. Virgilio Sanchez Osejo and Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. He did the translation. Okay, now, the book, as I said, it's a transcription from hypnotic sessions, and it's choppy. I said, he said, I said, he said, I said, he said. So the editors have combined it down into one paragraph. Editor's note. In an attempt to further establish the underwater tunnel mentioned by the witness, it was learned that this tunnel was not of solid rock as we think of a tunnel, and it did not have any projecting stalactites or stalagmites, as already mentioned by the witness. He could not describe its entrance opening in any frame of reference known to him. It's known to me. Okay. You've got this craft, or you're in an airplane, you do the same thing. You're in an airplane, you're diving towards the water, you're figuring you're a dead man, but you got X amount of time before you hit the water. Now, he's in a UFO. What he doesn't see is the field. He sees the water here, the field is here, so before he hits the water, the field hits the water and is pushing the water back. So he's not geared for this. He figures he's got seconds before he hits the water, but he doesn't realize the field already hit the water and is shoving this thing back. So he's suddenly in a tunnel. He didn't hit the water. He's in a tunnel. Okay. And he had difficulty describing the walls. They were not solid finished material like brick or stone, but were translucent and flowing like firmed water. Had soft sides, had like firmed water. Exact same thing. The ships flew in an airspace that opened in front of the craft as they proceeded, and they may have closed again behind it. And no water or anything else actually touched the surfaces of the vehicle itself. The swiftly flowing water was closed, but did not touch the crystal, which is the windshield. in front of the witness's face. It appears to us that the witness is describing a ship-generated force field of some kind which separated the mass of material ahead of it and produced a capsule of space around it, in which the craft flew. It didn't create, what it does is it's flying in its own field. Whatever's inside that field stays inside the field. Nothing else is being created. All right. Okay, the curve in the tunnel mentioned may have been simply a redirecting of the force field for a change of vector that was controlled by the extraterrestrial pilot sitting to the right of the witness in this small vehicle. Okay, the rush of water not touching the ship has been described by another UFO abductee who was taken in a spacecraft to an underwater base. I emailed Dr. Sanchez Osejo to ask him about where I could find this case. He says it's in the same book. So anyway, it's on my website. If you're interested in reading it, I have in the home page, I call them pigeonholes. They're all little pieces. And one is called Abductees and Water UFOs. And this is late 1972, and it has a great deal to say about water and the field. Okay. Now, how tough is this field? We're going to get back to that book in a second. I would like to bring to your attention something that any submariner would surely know about, and that's the strength of the wall between him and the water on the other side of it, and the depth he can safely dive to. There are stories of these UFOs at incredible depths which would crush a normal submarine. In the following, we get a view of how tough this high-energy field really is. A very good look at humanity's reaction to the presence of a UFO can be read in Dr. Richard Haynes' book entitled CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. In one chapter, we have 33 cases of aggression against a UFO using rocks in one case that bounce off an unseen field, pistols, shotguns, and rifles. By the way, Dr. Haynes is the head of NARCAP, National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomenon. Well, Dr. Haynes, I found a bigger gun. That's in this book. Now, this book is on my website. It can be read in total, free of charge. The researcher, Donald R. Todd, is dead. Myself and Jan Aldrich, who is trying to collect materials, we both tried to get it. The only thing I got back was my receipt, return receipt, and they never answered the letter I was attached to. So I said, well, if you're not going to do that, I'm going to put this up until you get hold of me. So in any event, it's an excellent book. I don't want to do the whole scenario on it. I'm just going to quote one small piece of it. The hammer of the gun barely preceded the green-orange belch from the muzzle as a projectile hurled upward. Within seconds, a visible splatter of sparks combined with a harsh crunch as a shell exploded short of its target and seemingly against some invisible field surrounding the craft. Meadows stared. What the hell? He turned to Claw. Try another one. Claw passed the order. One round, fire. Vomiting violent flame, the 5-incher spewed another shell upward with the same result. Premature sparks and explosion. Collision with the same invisible barrier. Now, the sparks can be of two things. One, a contact with an electrical field, or a grinding of a rapidly moving field, which this is, a rapidly moving field. You can compare that to an axe being sharpened on a grindstone. You get sparks coming off the axe in that case, too. Needless to say, in this story, the craft was not damaged. And I don't want to give you the rest of the story because it's a hell of an ending. Shades of the movie Independence Day. But why this heavy-duty field? Why does it have such strength? Why do they need it? Okay, well, besides defending themselves against gun-happy people on this planet, we also have to consider that this is a spaceship. and out in space there are a lot of very fast and variable-sized rocks, otherwise known as meteors. The combination of the craft's speed and these flying rocks would make one heck of a collision. Therefore, a collision field is necessary. Don't leave home without it. Okay, now your favorite part. In conclusion, these craft operate by physical principles. Though the details behind their operations are unknown to us, they should not be considered beyond our understanding. Excusing the craft's functions as paranormal or that of holographic projections or the result of some other impenetrable complication is not the way to understand the physical principles governing its technology. We should concentrate on the craft's mechanics, like this, because it is clearly a machine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I think we got some time left so we can do questions if anybody has any. If you can come up to the mic.
Hi. Hi. Very interesting talk. I was sitting there listening to all this and began to get a little bit amused at recalling a very, very ancient case. Nobody has investigated it, but there was a case a long time ago. I wonder if you have any thoughts about. The reports were that there was a very large cylindrical object, sometimes described as a column or a pillar.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I can't understand it too well.
We have so much reverb, I can't understand myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you guys fix it in the back? It seems the mic vibrating a lot here.
Right. Is this any better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. This object was described as a large cylindrical object, usually described in the historical records as a column or a pillar, and was.
I'm sorry, I got to get over to you and listen to you over here while you're talking, because it's
Okay, I think this is pretty bad.
Yeah.
The object was usually described as a column or a pillar. The reports claim that it was seen by thousands of people for several decades, and they even claimed an effect on water. They claimed that the Red Sea parted and they walked through it. And that was just amusing to me, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, you want to talk to Downing. He's in charge of the religious end. But yes, I find it very interesting, the correlation between what the Bible says of a UFO and the fact that they walked across dry land, supposedly, which is part 2. They took me off, I think. Yeah, they did. I have another paper in the background called Heat and Water UFOs. And this field is very, very hot. And the only people who walk into a cold area is if that field is off. Now, our leader, John Schuessler, wrote that book, Cash Landrum. If you doubt that there's any heat, all you got to do is read that book and you'll know how hot it is. It melted asphalt, had the people going down into air conditioning air conditioning in the wintertime. And, okay, another question?
Interesting observation. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Okay, the interesting observation too, just thinking about that as you mentioned that, there's also cases where ice has formed underneath the object.
I've only seen a couple
Paul
of those.
Hill talks about that in his book.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those too, but I can't correlate how the heck that happens. It's got to be something beyond me. Who knows?
My question was, a lot of your cases, or most of your cases are pretty old, 50s, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
The most recent one I saw was 1994.
Yeah, the trouble is we don't have the sources. Like in the old days, you had NICAP. Everybody was doing UFO reports. Then comes 70 with the Conran thing, and everybody's depressed. And the 80s were almost zip as far as reports went. Everybody was, well, UFOs are gone, NICAP's gone, APRO's gone. UFOs are gone. It's all over.
That was my question is, are we just not getting the quality, were we just not getting the quality of reports, or has the phenomenon changed?
I don't believe the phenomenon has changed. As a matter of fact, I get the same thing. I do have cases from 2001, 2, 3, and 4, 5, I believe, as well. But it's like one case, you know, here, one case there. And they have a lot of the attributes that I've just shown here. So it's not that, it's a matter of reporting. You got to have people doing cases, and MUFON is the only thing right now. We're the only ship, people. We're it. So until I've found several good organizations here. Oh, well. That have large groups of investigators. Now, that's what we're going to have to do again, because NICAP had investigators and APRO had investigators, people who were interested in doing reports. Well, now all we have is one guy on the West Coast with a website, and we don't have investigators in his part. And then, of course, you got Art Bell. He's going to come to your house, sure. So the only thing we have is us. So we've got to get this engine going here.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you very much.
Enjoyed it very much. What I wanted to ask you about pertains to the UFO and water conditions, if you want to call it. My interest is in the Great Lakes region. I had seen satellite footage of an underground base, I believe it was 1968, over Lake Ontario. I was wondering if your studies, if you had come across anything pertaining to underwater UFO bases pertaining to the Great Lakes areas or any place else. I had seen satellite footage from 1968. I believe it was Lake Ontario.
I've never seen this footage, but as far as
it's a
underwater bases
photograph.
go, there's always been a rumor of this. Venezuela had a thing where the driver says, "Oh, we see them coming out of the water all the time here, so there must be a base." There was a movie called what the heck was it? Sphere, and that was an underwater base type UFO, big thing. You know, it didn't come out of the water, but there are other places in the world where everybody inflicts this into the literature that there's a base. We have yet to find this base, and yet that last case I was talking about in the abductee thing, all right? You go to the abduction site, and there's only 2 cases in there. The big case that has the picture of the gray, has a base in it. He was taken to a base. He says the UFO, after he does all his description of what the water's doing, he says the UFO came to this side of a mountain or a flat area, and it projected a force field forward. The door opened within this force field, and the UFO went in. So here you have doors underwater and a force field big enough to let a UFO in. So, I mean, of course, I have to be a little skeptical at times, and I have no idea. You only have a few reports about these bases. So until we get more and more of that together and make sense, yes,
Thank you,
maybe we have bases.
I've got a number of old archives that I've been collecting for years.
I'm sorry, you
And
found old what?
archives,
Archives.
collections of old magazines and things. And I recall a couple of cases, one of which involved a UFO in South America traveling across the top of trees, and the tops of the trees were whipping around in a circular motion as it traveled under it.
The trees were whipping around?
Yeah, just the tops.
Yeah.
Sort of swirling underneath it and being bent down and then snapping back up as it went by. And this sounds like another case of that field around the bottom.
I don't know what that would signify. Getting
Secondly-
sap out of the tree.
What?
You say sap came out of the tree?
No, no. The branches snapped back up as it passed.
Branches snapped back up, yeah.
They were depressed at the top of the tree and sort of whirling.
Well, you've got this air current whipping around, and so I can see the things, you know, that they're going to snap back to their original position,
Right.
just like they would in the wind.
Secondly, it seems to me the second or third cover of Fate magazine showed a UFO hovering over the Gulf of St. Lawrence or the St. Lawrence River. It was being watched from a cliff by several people.
And
it had...
The last thing I heard was St. Lawrence River.
Yeah. And it had a bubbling plateau of water under it.
A plateau of water under it?
Under it, yes. A rise of the water, as if the water is being sucked up to it.
Oh, yeah.
And there were some beings running around on the top. And
I'm having a hard time
all
hearing you.
kind of things.
See a plateau of water under the UFO?
Yes, in the illustration.
Well, see, the trouble with these magazines is I have several magazines. As a matter of fact, that one I showed with, what was the name of it? The Antilles incident. That's an artist's conception of a UFO coming out of water. Well, he had water pouring off the top of the UFO, you know, off the UFO itself. That's not right. It's not right.
That's not what this was showing. It was hovering over the water for some 20 or 30 minutes, watched by several people. The article inside described it in detail. And there was a swirling, bubbling hump of water underneath it as it hovered.
Hang on 1 second. Can everybody hear the question? That must be my ears. I can't hear it too well. Maybe if I come over to you and just repeat it without going through the microphone.
All right. This was the cover of the Fate magazine. I think it was the third issue, way
Yeah,
back when.
yeah.
And it was a spherical item with a bunch of beings hovering, banging around the top of it, doing something. And a number of people watched from the top of a nearby cliff. And underneath it, the water was humped up.
Well, I can see that. Yeah, I mean,
And it sat there.
you're talking they were doing maintenance or collecting water or something like that. Yeah, I can see that. But the UFO would have to be off the top of the water for it to be, to be sucked up. Well, that's exactly what I did in the presentation.
It was just sitting there. It wasn't coming in or out at the top.
Yeah. Hmm? Well, I mean, it's all a matter of height. It doesn't have to move. The UFO can just sit there. As a matter of fact, half of these cases are just that. They're sitting at some altitude, and they're not coming out of the water. They're coming down and hovering. And that's what...
This was a very good illustration of what you were talking about.
Yeah. No, the only thing I have problems with is illustrations of these things done by artists, because well, my website is an illustration by an artist. This is not a real UFO coming out of the water. It's just an illustration. We have very few photographs of real water UFOs. The only one we can talk about is the Maccabee one, which was a Polaroid picture, and Maccabee did a heck of a thing of verifying the fact that it was real. If we have no other questions, I guess it's lunchtime. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've stumbled a couple of times.
I was going to tell you, I will scan you a picture and a case. I have the archive that was sent to me. And it's a
those guys.
Thank you very much.
It was very good.